I want you, our audience, to be involved in this discussion. We've got about 20 minutes. We're going to discuss things, and we'd like questions. And we've got a microphone right next to you, man. Could you stand up and tell us who you are, and let everyone see you so that we know what's going on?
Yes, hello. Is this on? Hi, my name's Sarah, and I'm the leader of the Internet of Everything for Cisco. So I have two questions. Outside of my Cisco role, I'm very interested in animal conservation.
And just tell us who Cisco is so that we know.
Cisco is one of the world's largest technology companies. We make the internet, but I'm very cautious of saying that when HP are on the stage. But think of me as being here as a passionate animal person today, which is what I'm really here for. So I have two questions, one for HP and one for yourself. My first question to you was whether you'd done any of the Google imagery usage in Africa to look at where elephants, rhinos, and poachers are, so we could do something very similar to try and help some of our endangered species, which is something very close to my heart. Have you done anything like that yet, or could you?
We haven't. I was approached yesterday by someone, though, who does want to look at rhinos in South Africa, so we may do in the future. I have to say that we do tend to try and work where there are big teams of data scientists who can volunteer on projects. And so we haven't done that much work in Africa in general. GiveDirectly's head office was in New York, so they could interact with the volunteers. So it's really important for us that the nonprofit we're working with can meet volunteers face to face, which has been part of the reason why we haven't done as many things in, probably game reserves in Africa.
Okay.
But,
yeah. Okay, maybe we could talk about it.
And something we can follow up on as well, because we're doing quite a lot of applications with reserve owners and managers that's starting to get into some of those areas. So there might be some crossover.
Yeah, I would love that if we could talk about that later. That would be great. And then the second thing was I think what you're doing with Earth Insights is fantastic, and you're using what's your core business for the help of an NGO. So that is as our Vodafone. So that's fantastic. And I was wondering how you justified that within HP. Is it part of your CSR program? Is that how you did it?
Yeah, actually, the genesis is quite interesting. It's fairly new, a couple years old, but it was very much a joint initiative for the corporate affairs team, where our CSR social innovation team resides, and our enterprise services business. And increasingly, we have made efforts to really embed our technology and the expertise of our employees in the work that we're doing around sustainability and social innovation. And so this was our first test run, really, working with the enterprise services team around big data. And so it was very much hand in hand working with Conservation International, first of all, to scope out whether they could benefit from leveraging our big data solutions, and then secondly, bringing that to life. And I find it really interesting in this field of sustainability and social innovation that increasingly we're being inspired by what we're seeing of our businesses and how they are bringing the solutions to their customers for impact. This is one example, but even building on our Conservation International partnership, we were inspired by a case study where our team from HP Explore is working with NASCAR on a kind of a fan and media platform to better understand the fans in racing, at least 75 million, and what they care about in the sport. And we actually brought that to bear with a partnership with Conservation International to help them understand the conversation that they were generating and participating in on social media through their Nature is Speaking campaign, where they brought 5 film stars like Harrison Ford as the ocean, and my favorite, Kevin Spacey, doing the voice of the rainforest, and really helping them understand who they were reaching and what they cared about. So I think you're right. I think it's successful because it goes arm in arm with what our businesses care about.
Okay, thank you both.
Great, thank you. Just raise your hands when you want to, and I'll come to you right over there, sir. We have one. Swati, it's on this side. Okay. Well, I tell you what, we'll come back to you. So give it to Jeff. Just put up your hand again. Jeff, we'll come to you later, certainly.
Great, thanks. So my name's Jeff Odom. I'm head of CR at Experian. So most of you guys will know us from credit, but we're also a data company. And I just wanted to pick up, Kenneth, on your last point.
Jeff, let everyone understand what Experian is. Okay, so
credit rating agency. If you guys want to know if you're going to get a credit card, then go to our site.
Right, okay.
But we also are looking at, we're also a data analytics company, and we help a lot of businesses in terms of understanding what their information holds and what insights they can get out of that. So we work with companies in using big data for themselves, but also increasingly are interested in big data for social good as well. And I think just wanted to pick up, Kenneth, on your last point. I agree that collaboration is really going to be the key in terms of using big data for social good, but there's a lot of barriers that exist, whether or not it's on the company side, so willing to let some of their data go for privacy issues or for regulatory issues, but also even on some of the NGO side for the quality of the data that they have. Some of the data is stuck in databases, some of it's still in paper form. And I was wondering if you just had any examples of some really great collaborations where organizations and companies were able to overcome some of those barriers.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So I guess I could point out two. One I mentioned, which was Orange, the telecom operator, anonymizing its data for operations in Africa. I believe it was Senegal, I believe it was Cote d'Ivoire as well, and maybe there was a third. At any rate, they were able to take all of the cell phone traffic for a given area, maybe nationwide. I didn't actually look at the database directly to know. Over a period of time, in a long period, it was like a 3-month period. And so it was millions of records. And they were able to anonymize it in a way that they felt comfortable releasing it so that researchers could look at it and they got those benefits out of it. It was an amazing test case that this was feasible to do. And it was sort of a competition, and then they hosted a little award ceremony in Cambridge, Massachusetts for that. So it made it even more ironic that during the Ebola scandal, everyone sort of didn't want to try to go down that route, even though a lot of the work had been done in advance. The second thing I could point to, because we don't have a lot of good examples, is DataKind. I've been following DataKind since its inception. In fact, I know Jake Porway, and before it was even called DataKind, we swapped emails because I was in Japan, cared about these issues, wanted to get involved, and I did in a small way, and then wrote about it. So lots of charities have gone through the DataKind experience and have found really interesting findings. There's one on old age people. You probably know what I'm referring to. It has age in the title. And they were able to identify who was most in need so they could better target their help. An incredible finding by one of the local authorities was that who would do better if you were a single parent raising a child? And it turns out that a lot of children and young toddlers were actually doing better if they were living with the father than with the mother. Completely counterintuitive finding, particularly because we have a tradition of the courts awarding custody to the mother, right? So it wasn't a very statistically robust finding, but it did at least, because you'd have to do a lot more analyses of it than you could in one night at a data dive, but it did show the value for the NGO of going through the process of making its data clean and anonymous, that they would feel willing to share it because of the value that they were then receiving back.
Right. So this is, yes.
As well.
You go.
I have many views on what you just said. Well, one of the things is that, yes, charities often do have messy data, and that's why they need your pro bono volunteer data scientists to go and help them with it. But also, if they're approaching you for data sharing, they probably know what they're doing. They have their ducks in a row. They're a bit savvier. But the other thing is, there's a lot of work being done on this. There are very few, I think, actual examples where the private sector has explicitly shared a data set with an NGO. The New York University, the University of Leiden, and the World Economic Forum have something called the Data Governance Project, which is trying to create guidelines to do just that. So I think it's a very kind of new, exciting area.
Okay. So this whole idea of data sharing, which we've just described, and essentially GSK is sharing its data, isn't it? I mean, that's what it's doing.
Yeah, but I guess I've been struck by how willing companies have been to work together on this. So we took a first step, if you like, and demonstrated that the barriers could be addressed. But since then, we've got other companies coming on board. There's now 12 companies using that site. And researchers can actually request data from, let's say, GSK and Roche as part of a single project. And that all the time we've been working towards a vision where people can request data from across industry and indeed perhaps academia, because that's where the real value is going to come, when they can combine data from different sources.
Right. So the argument goes that if there's this concept called data sharing, that companies are going to come under increasing pressure in the same way that they come under pressure to reveal what's in their hamburgers or how they make their products, increasing pressure to share the data our data. I mean, everyone's sitting here with a cell phone with an app on it, at least one, stuffing data down to someone's big store somewhere, and the pressure is going to be like, share that data for the common good rather than for your commercial good. Do you think that is an understandable pressure, Sally?
I mean, I think, as you've said, it's an area that's being explored by everyone right now, and the issue is whose data is it anyway? There's actually an application, I think it's on the FT website, and you can actually go and work out how much your individual data is worth. You enter your profile, and if you've got a sick elderly relative and a child with learning difficulties and a mortgage, then your data might be worth more than someone else's data who's flying a jet plane, remarkably, just because you're going to be more consumptive from government services, for example. So you can work out how much your data's worth, but there is a big issue about is the data that we might sell or give away actually our data to sell or give away? And similarly, there is a big academic debate about, is that data traceable? And could someone take that data and then correlate it with other data and actually identify you? And that's a great nervousness. So could, in the intent of seeking to do something good, could we actually do more harm? Because and once that genie is out, it's very hard to get it back in. So I think it's being explored. I think there's an absolute issue of trust. I think that the World Economic Forum talked about intermediaries and brokers, where you release your data to an intermediary that you trust, and we release your data to that intermediary, and then that can be acted on. So I think we're feeling our way on those models. I think it's one of the reasons why Christelle can't be here today is because she's in New York talking to a number of NGOs about those models. We're running experiments in closed rooms in Shoreditch where we take the data scientists and we mash up some of our data with other people's data. Obviously, and the beautiful thing about big data is you don't need a hypothesis. You just need an artist to spot a pattern that you haven't thought about and then work out why that pattern exists. That's the artistry that data scientists do. But I think we're navigating our way towards it. The appetite is there, though. There's no doubt the appetite is there.
Great, wonderful, thank you. I'm going to go to the next question over here. Swati is coming to you.
Hello, my name is Duncan Price, Sustainability Director at Bureau Happold. We're an engineering company. Thank you very much to the panel. I thought it was really interesting you had representation of different stakeholders, so those that own the data, those that own the platforms, and maybe those that have the analytical skills to do something with it. So I just wanted to ask the panel who they see as being the winners and losers in this big data world, and if you actually have to get everybody to collaborate, which I think you've all described, what are the incentives required to make this the norm, where people are using data for good?
Anne, you were asked about poaching. Is the environment going to be the beneficiary of this or not?
Yeah, I think it's probably not a straightforward answer. I think there's huge potential, and we don't even understand what the potential is of big data and using it for social good. One of the most striking statistics around big data that I would have liked to see on your screen under the chair was that between 8 and 10 million new servers will be required to accommodate the explosion of data in the next 3 years, and that's like line them up, and it's 200 football fields, and so like that's, I mean, of course that's a huge opportunity for a company like HP, but it's also a huge responsibility, and that's why we're looking at investing in very seriously space and energy efficient servers so that we can try to mitigate some of the negative impact on the environment. I mean, that's not directly a big data issue, but it's definitely related to the underlying infrastructure.
Right. Robert, you work for an industry which is controversial to the extent that sometimes you make us well, but you also make yourself rich, and in the GSK's point now, you make yourself poor. But I mean, do you see this argument as something that you can get to grips with, that everyone can win from this, or are there going to be losers?
Yeah. I think from the perspective of the area of science that we're in, hopefully the winners will be the patients and science. So actually, before I worked at GSK, I worked with researchers in the NHS and in academia. And as I moved from that little network of the research community into another, I took two things with me. And one is that good science demands data scrutiny. We can't possibly do this on our own. And if any part of that network works on their own, it's not going to lead to the best science. And secondly, working together and sharing data is in the best interest of the patients. And if you can provide the appropriate safeguards, then hopefully they will be the winners in terms of the new science and the improvements that come from that.
All right, great. I want the audience to participate as much as possible. One over there, and then one at the back over there. The next one, please.
Hi, my name is Armin from GE Lighting. I was stuck.
You just speak up a little bit, actually. Your
My name is Armin Meyer from GE Lighting. I was stuck on the comment by Ken about how big data can have a qualitative shift or impact. And I was thinking about the climate negotiations, the global climate negotiations. If there's one area where there's been a lot of data generated already, it's in climate, right? We've got so much data, reams of data about how the planet is warming, oceans are, etc. Do you think there's still room or scope for big data to have a breakthrough effect on the climate negotiations?
Okay, good question. Okay. Who's going to take that? Ken, do you want to take that quickly?
No, well, there's a couple of reasons why not. So big data can actually help us reduce emissions, right? If we learn different techniques to optimize, for example, servers. If we've got all these servers, 5% of global emissions just come from the servers, and if we get a 50% reduction of chip processing and less cooling needed for it because the heat consumption is less, we get that gain. So it's a good win. So that's where it would work, but not in the formal climate negotiations for a couple of reasons. One, most of the body of law that we're negotiating is built on previous law that's now about 3 decades old. So it's based on small data and it's based on counting. And so just big data itself isn't going to get you, there's just no way to bring it into it. What we can make what we count more efficient, and we can try to do what we're trying to do, reduce emissions a little bit better and try to find new ways to surveil the people who sign on to accords. But formally, will big data sort of help us in a climate negotiation? No, it won't.
That's a pretty clear answer. There, could we get to the back over there? And then on to the lady over there. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Wouter van Tol. I work in Samsung. I look after corporate citizenship for Europe. Samsung is the company that makes mobile phones and tablets and fridges and ovens. And
thank you for letting us know.
So my question is this. Actually, if you look at the new value that you can create, I think it's relatively easy to come up with ideas for big data and how you can create that extra value. Just thinking about what Samsung and Vodafone could do together, you can come up with many ways of creating the value. But I want to push back on what you said earlier about that people are shouting, liberate this data for the common good, because to us they're shouting, keep my information safe. And the media pressure is also very strongly on keeping data private. If you look at the European Commission, you will know as well that the pressure is huge to maximize data privacy. So for us, the cost of big data for the common good is at the moment greater than the benefit. So I'm struggling to convince some of my superiors on going down this route. So what would you advise?
Okay, that's a very, very, very interesting question. DataKind is trying to do this, isn't it? So could we get some advice from you about how you would convince the holders of this data that they should share it with you?
So, I mean, I understand it's complicated, but I would say that a lot of times the data that the charities need it can be 4 years out of date, it can be aggregate, it can be ward level. It's not necessarily the kind of data, it's not individual level data at all. What they need is they want to kind of understand their local population, their local beneficiaries, or whatever it may be. So I think to a certain extent there are ways around that. Yes, I mean, I would agree. I actually have a meeting with the Information Commissioner to talk about some of these issues because we're struggling to deal with it, because we've had charities sharing data with each other. And it's, it's new.
Robert, a quick comment, and then we're going to move on. I mean, you've had the most experience, the GSK has had the most experience. They initiated this whole thing of data sharing. And so you've come across all these issues.
Yeah.
What do you think the way forward is?
It is a very real issue. I mean, I think one of the reasons we wanted to do this was to maximise the contribution that people give when they take part in a trial. And I believe they do that with the knowledge and hope that that information will be used.
How would you convince your bosses to share more? That was the issue, wasn't it? How do you convince them to share more?
So I think it's about sharing it in an appropriate way. So this question was about privacy. We're sharing anonymized data in a secure portal through which the researchers can access the data but not download the results.
Right.
And explaining those safeguards to people within the company and outside is an important part of convincing people why this is the right way to do it.
Right. Sally, do you think, we're going to come back to Sally, do you think the issue of privacy and the obsession with privacy in the press is holding us back from this and not allowing the benefits to be seen?
Well, I think if it is holding us back, it's probably a fair issue to hold us back, because it's, it's such a big issue, and people have such great fear, and for good reasons as well. So I think it's a really big discussion, and it does need to happen. I think in the meantime there are good experiments, there's healthy experiments. I think it's absolutely a good point that if the data is old and if it can be aggregated and if people can be locked in a room, there's things that we can do in the meantime to add value and create opportunities to spot patterns and create solutions from that. But it's a mankind issue. It's not any one company's issue to work through that, and that's why it takes the NGOs and the corporates and the regulators and the governments to work through it, and it's nuanced for each country as well.
Great.
So.
I would just add on to that. Clearly what we do with the data is very important in terms of how we protect it, but that is only just one part of the picture. We want safe data, but we want safe people, safe projects, safe settings, and I think we do need to think about the range of controls, not just how we're handling the data before we give it to people.
Right, great. Ken, a quick comment and then we move on?
To that, I think that there's actually the two trends can coexist, right? There can be calls for people to release the data, as Peter's saying, and there can be people who don't want the data released because there's a privacy concern there. And the regulators definitely are the ancien regime. They're definitely the old guard. So I wouldn't use that as the barometer of what to do, because they defer to the status quo, to yesteryear, and they need to be educated by you and your team. The way to do it is going to have to be, I think, to somehow try to fuse self-interest with the release of the data. And the one example of that, there's a couple, but in particular Netflix. So Netflix created a prize, and they have a lot of data scientists, but they tried to optimize how they use their data. So they anonymized it, and they gave it to lots of different teams over a year, and they were going to give $1 million to the team that could actually create a 10% bump in their recommendation system, right, that they otherwise wouldn't do. It was great for them. It was great for the data scientists to use. Now you could say that you're not saving the world by having better movie recommendations. I think that's fair. But nevertheless, it showed that a company, if they can fuse economic self-interest with the release of that data, and they married it to something philanthropic, in the case Google Flu Trends does it as well, but Google doesn't really get a payback other than CSR from that, then it would be possible. But I think you're going to have to educate your superiors
It's an opt-in trade, isn't it? It's a trading model, an opt-in model. So.
Great.
It might not have to be, but one way could be that way.
Thank you. We've just got a few minutes left, and we're going to go to a question over there. And then I hope we have time to come to you.
Hello, my name's Louise Clancy, and I run the Mayor of London's Business Energy Challenge. This year, we're thinking of introducing a new award. Ooh, is that the excitement in the room? And it's an award for businesses that make their data open, and that's data on energy demand and data about their locations, etc. And that's to hopefully drive greater levels of energy efficiency. So if the companies enter the award and they're willing to put their data out there, how do we get the eyes of data scientists, etc., on that data? Is there somewhere where you can say, hey, well, this data set is available, come in, take a look at it and see what you can do with it?
Right. Well, Emma has more data scientists that she knows what to do with. Lucky girl. So what's your response to that? How do you get eyes on the data?
I mean, there's a thriving meetup community of data scientists in London. I think it is hard. I think they're a community who hang out by themselves. So they're not, sorry, they're not the easiest to tap into. I don't know if I have an easy answer apart from just come and talk to me after this.
Any quick comments on that? No? Okay, we're going to go. Thank you, and good luck with the award, and I hope it gets widely publicized. Is the prize big? Lots of money?
It's a really nice looking prize, lots of aesthetic.
Okay. You've got everyone really interested. Great. Okay, good luck there. There's a lady there.
Hi. I'm Kate Larson. I don't have any prizes to offer, I'm sorry. I work on supply chain CSR part-time for a US brand as a director and consulting to clients such as the World Bank as well. A lot on Bangladesh, China, Cambodia, and so I've worked with worker helpline programs for many years where we get a lot of data which is a mess, so Emma, I can't wait to talk to you. But the question I wanted to ask is a little bit around as cell phones proliferate and they're not quite, or at least smartphones are not quite at a high level of proliferation in Bangladesh right now when we look at supply chain worker conditions to try to get data and figure out how to help people. Part of the issue is the technology, the other issue is literacy. So I was just wondering if people could speak a little bit to engaging people when there isn't literacy. I know things have been worked on, but just any thoughts to leave us with. Thank you.
Okay, so quick thoughts. This is like a really easy question. How can you increase literacy through big data? Any possibilities? That was the question, wasn't it? How can you use the information gathered? Right.
People are illiterate, and yet we want to get data and use data to help.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Ken.
Yeah, so there's a way. I won't tell you about machine learning and how it's overcoming. There's a lot of work on speech recognition. Don't bother with that. Here's what's happening. So a company called JANA, J-A-N-A, does surveys. And in the third world, it could be, is there clean water, but it could also be how much time do you buy laundry detergent, right, for Procter & Gamble. Either way, in return for people answering surveys, they get some money on their mobile phone. They get phone credit. So basically, if you want to overcome illiteracy to collect data from people who are probably workers in the supply chain, give them phone credit for replying. A little bit of financial self-interest will overcome whatever barriers you experience.
Yes, exactly. We've got a number of companies we do that for. We've developed applications. We give a phone credit. They fill out a survey, and those surveys can be icon-based. It's not all words-based. So it can be graphically based, and they get a reward for filling out the survey. And then the ultimate company who's consuming that product knows the worker conditions are healthy and safety, and they're being well treated, even if it's not a factory they own. So.
Great. And you were going to...
No, I was also going to bring an example of where we used surveys using visuals in lieu of words, and so that was very effective. Example in Paraguay. I mean, in our supply chains, we work extensively with workers and with management, but it tends to be pretty in person rather than virtual, and probably more traditional in many ways. But we find that it's incredibly effective, and when we engage in pretty serious risk analysis and sensing and prioritize factories and sites and have external and internal audits and assessments, we find that overall that's a good way, maybe not the most efficient way, but a very effective way of raising the standards of conditions for workers.
Great. Good. We've come to the end of our time. I think it's a hallelujah time. We've kept you awake talking about data, isn't it? Great. And I want to thank our panelists and our speaker very, very much for keeping us awake, intriguing us. And just out of interest, by a show of hands, do you think business is going to share its data for the common good? Half and a half. OK. We live in hope, and I hope the Samsung man persuades your bosses to share more of that data, especially that little whistle that goes out, which you hear on the tube train. So thank you very much indeed.